Hi, I'm Adri, and I'm going to tell you all about life's trials and tribulations.
I'm Alan, and I'm going to teach you about the history of the coil.
I'm Darren, and I'm going to tell you why German theater of the 1890s is still relevant today.
What do all of these stories have to do with the word spring? Find out in this week's episode of History Bluffs! Hello and welcome to another weekly episode of History Bluffs, where truth is stranger than fiction. And now I want to welcome to the show, it's your host, Chris!
Hello. Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of History Bluffs. My name is Chris, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. We have three outstanding armchair historians ready to wow you with their knowledge of history. But first, I want to give up a quick round of applause for our tech team, Gina and Adam.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ditto.
Let's get in our first up. Adri. Hello, Adri. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah. As Adam pointed out, our topic this week is spring. So I have a question for you. Do you prefer to spring ahead or fall back?
I prefer whichever one gives you more sleep. That one night a year.
I
don't know which one it is, but whichever one, that's
fall back. It's fall back. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Good answer. Well, welcome. And our second armchair historian this week is Alan. Hello, Alan.
Hi, how are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. Alan, have you ever made an unexpected discovery while spring cleaning by any chance?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, but they're typically dead Florida wildlife. It's usually a lizard skeleton or a palmetto bug.
Okay. All right. Well, Darren is our third historian for this week. How are you? That is you.
That is me,
and
just
Darren,
verifying.
Yes, it is you. Have you ever trained for something in the spring?
I don't recall training ever for anything.
All right, that's fair. That's fair because you're always prepared. You don't need to train. That's the way that's the kind of people that we draw for our historian, that level of readiness. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have
believe that.
Yes, indeed. We have met Adri. We've met Alan. We heard that our topic for this evening is going to be spring. And the way this show works is these three outstanding armchair historians are going to tell us a story inspired by the word spring. However, one of them is bluffing. The other two are telling true stories. So, can I get our tech team to give us through how this show works?
You got it, Chris. It's a game show after all. There's got to be some rules. Here they are.
Right. So our historians are all inspired by the topic. Tonight, the topic is spring. The two true stories from historians are going to be factual stories. The bluff story is fictional-based story. There might be some that story, but it's a fictional premise story. And we ask the audience, please do not help by means of Googling any information and putting it up in our comments during the first couple of rounds. We have 3 rounds for this. I know, but that's the way we do it. We ask for you to make a debunk at the end of the 3 rounds as to who is tonight's bluff, because I don't even know. So with that, let us from the rule to now come back here. And as I said, we have 3 rounds, and each round successively will be getting shorter and shorter. 5 seconds. Each of them will open theirs with a 75-second round, introducing their premise, telling us a little bit about the background of their story, and getting into their story. The second round will cut down to 60 seconds, And then the third and final round, they will wrap up their story in 45 seconds in round 3. So that's how it works. So that being said, Adrian got out. Please to the main spot. Adrian's going to be our first historian, and we're going to move to round number. Nice. Well done. So I'm going to ask the tech team to put the Racker 9300 up above your head, Adri, so we can tell who has done which of the. And for those of you watching at home that have been watching regularly and say, well, they normally have a round tracker 9000, this is actually indeed an upgrade to the 9300. So we are proud to have that.
We're always improving.
We're always improving. Adria, you're going to see a sundial come up momentarily, and when you have 75 seconds to tell us your first round inspired by spring, and we will see that sundial now.
Perfect. So my story is today's lesson is inspired by the city of Springfield. Which one, you might ask, since there's 41 Springfields in the United States. So today I'm going to be talking about the original Springfield, the one the other 40 are named after, which is Springfield, Massachusetts, known as the City of Firsts. It's the birthplace of basketball and Theodore Geisel, aka Dr. Seuss. Another one of its firsts was the witch trials of 1651 and 1652, as opposed to the Salem witch trials, which were held between 1692 and 1693, where 200 witches were tried and most of them killed on the spot or a little later on. The events happened 40 years apart, but also only 100 miles apart between Salem and Springfield. Now, this specific story is in 1651 in the town of Springfield, Massachusetts, like I mentioned, when it was rocked by a crazy situation that involved a woman named Mary Bliss, who then married and became Mary Parsons. Basically, I'm going to finish that in round 2.
Basically, we'll hear more information in round number 2. All right, Adri.
Right.
Alan, let's hear your take on Adri's opening salvo about all of 41 of them.
It's an interesting thing she's presented us. First is that the Springfield, Massachusetts is the first Springfield, but it's quite a coincidence that it's also the first place there was basketball or witch trials, which, of course, as she mentioned, was more famously done just 100 miles up the road at Salem. So while this is interesting, maybe it's too interesting.
Ooh, okay, too interesting, perhaps. Darren, what say you, Darren? Yeah.
I've seen the opening segment of The Simpsons many, many times, and I don't recall any of this stuff in there, so I'm highly dubious.
Mm-hmm.
Highly dubious
Famously
indeed.
takes place in Springfield.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Takes place in Springfield. And interestingly, Springfield, Massachusetts, they call themselves the City of First. They call themselves something, so they just said we're the City of Firsts. Little known fact. All right, we've heard from Adri. We are now going to pull up our we are going to see a sundial come up, and you'll hear that boom. And when you hear that boom, you have 75 seconds on the clock. And
Here it comes. There it is. All right, so I'm going to tell you the history of the spring. Now, the spring you probably associate with the coil, but anyone who's studied engineering probably knows that the coil is not the only spring. As a matter of fact, the first ever spring was not a coil or anything close to it, but it did store potential energy in the form of the original primitive bow from the bow and arrow that is dated about 65,000 years ago. Subsequently, other non-coiled springs were invented. And many of them are still used to this date in a lot of vehicle suspensions, most commonly the leaf spring, which when I first heard the term, I thought it was shaped like a metal leaf and then the stem was going to be part of it. No, that's not how it works. A leaf spring is actually several layers of what look like a primitive bow on top of each other, and then they suspend vehicle suspension in that regard. And I will get to the invention of the coiled spring in round 2. Buzzer.
Ooh. He's so all right. That 10 points to Alan for his cockiness of calling his own buzzer. Darren, what you think of Alan's first round story there?
I demand time for the equal time for the other simple machines. Where is the lever or the pulley or the inclined plane?
Well, that's not
Good
what
question.
the topic is.
Yeah. They all followed.
This is a democracy. We demand equal time.
They were all in his story, but they all followed the lever. Bada boom.
Wow.
Okay, Adri.
Adri, what's your story?
What did I say? Okay, so a couple red flags for me. Mostly, he said that the coil was a derivative of the bow and arrow, but the bow and arrow is a straight material, but the coil is a coil. And then he mentioned leaf spring and another bow and a vehicle, and it just seems to be a little bit all over the place for me. So I have red flags flying.
Okay. Red flags flying as if they were shot from a bow and arrow, perhaps. So far for me, I'm full of them tonight. I'm full of something tonight, Darren. But my so far, Alan's story is tracking for me a little bit, only because my college roommate last was born in the spring. So maybe some truth to that. We're going to move to Darren. Darren, you are bringing up the third portion of round 3. So you're going to see the sundial, and you'll hear the boom. And when you have that, you have the floor for your first round, 75-second story.
Right, in 1891, when Frank Wedekind wrote the play Spring Awakening, little did he know that over a century later, his groundbreaking play about the sexually repressive German society of the late 1800s would still be making waves all over the world 100 years later. The play, which is considered a cornerstone of modern theater, has been controversial from the start. Its themes of sexuality were far ahead of its time, so far ahead that it took 15 years between the time the play was written and the time it took the stage at the Deutsches Theater in 1906. Since then, the play has been translated into 13 languages and produced all over the world, though often heavily censored. Spring Awakening talks about topics such as puberty, sexuality, rape, child abuse, homosexuality, suicide, teenage pregnancy, and abortion. It's so controversial to this day, it said Ron DeSantis would spontaneously combust if he were to attend a performance of it. And with topics like suicide, child abuse, and abortion, it's no wonder that in the 1990s, Duncan Sheik and Steven Sater would say out loud, "Hey, that sounds like a musical." And then 10 years later, it opened on Broadway and won 3 Tonys.
Wow. All right. It sounds like progress. 15 years to get the original one produced and produced. So they're trending in the right direction. Adri, what'd you think of Darren's first round story about?
Well, the first sentence, sexually repressive German. Is there such a thing?
It's redundant.
I don't know that could be true. And then, just hearing, and I'm just quoting the facts, that DeSantis would spontaneously combust. I say we get this thing produced ASAP. If possible. I'd put some money behind that.
He's willing to contribute. Alan, what'd you think? Alan, what'd you think of that round?
So is Darren just gambling on the fact that we haven't watched the play Spring Awakening? Because if we had, we could probably call out any number of potential bluffs in this. As someone who's never seen it, I will just assume that, 1906 may be a little early to be talking about abortion in mainstream entertainment. I don't know.
Hey, it's not my fault y'all are Philistines.
I don't even know what that means, but I'm here for it.
I think it's a compliment.
He knows us so well.
I do. It's a compliment.
Hey, Chris, before we move out of round one
Yes.
entirely, we've got some audience play here from the previous between. Looks like Rich is back with us.
Hello, Rich.
Yeah.
I don't remember Adam and Eve carrying around a bow and arrow 65,000 years ago. All right.
My thought
Yeah.
on that is kind of where would they keep it? Because didn't they start out naked until the fruit thing?
Oh, yeah, that's
There's
true.
so many inaccuracies for me to address in all of these statements. I don't know where to begin.
It was a very small bow and arrow.
And it was
Well,
cold that day.
We thank Rich for his interactive comments coming in from the YouTubes. We appreciate your
Thank you, Rich.
participation.
Thank
Back
you,
to you,
Rich.
Chris.
Yes, thank you.
Indeed. So, we have heard from all three armchair historians in round number one. As you can see on our round tracker 9300, we are through round number one. We're going to move on now to the first of the condensed time rounds. That's round number two, where each can have 60 seconds to tell the second portion of their story. So we will move over to Alan, and Alan will be our first one up for round number two. But let's go to round number two.
Here we are.
Here we are. All right, Alan, you now have 60 seconds for your second round of your story. You'll see the sundial come up momentarily. When you hear the boom, you have the floor.
All right. Well, aside from Rich's inaccurate description of what happened 65,000 years ago, there were Egyptian chariots 3,600 years ago, which had pharaohs depicted and warriors proudly riding on a one-horse-drawn chariot with spoked wheels, springs, and shock absorbers, including anti-roll bars and a convex-shaped rear view mirror, which is besides the point. We're on springs. Now let's go into the evolution of the spring, and I'm going to go into, I believe it is 1763, when Tradwell invented the first ever coiled spring. Now, it was a British patent, number 792, and it was considered a big step from the leaf spring, which had to be lubricated often and was quite squeaky. And a one-up for the British. Good job, British.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alan, for that round two version of your story. Darren, let's bring you up. And what did you think of Alan's story there?
It was quite the time jump, but props for adding the wheel and axle into the list of simple machines. And by just reference, Egypt, the pyramids, we can just assume the inclined plane is in the set. So you're making progress.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see what you have in round three.
Okay.
Wow. And I think he was also trying to mash up with yours, talked about lubricating the squeaky thing. Adri, what do you think about Alan's story in round two?
Well, I got a couple more red flags when he mentioned roll cages and rear view mirrors in the Egyptian, whatever you call
The
those
chariots?
things.
The chariots.
Yes. I don't remember seeing that on Gladiator, but maybe I blinked. I too am looking forward to round three because I can just see him saying, jumping forward to the space shuttle and deep sea exploration and where the coil plays into that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
Hope springs eternal.
Hope springs eternal. Bada boom. Bada boom. All right.
There it is. I got you.
There it is.
Yep.
There we go. So, all right. So, Adri was looking for a chariot reference, and that would have really sealed the deal for her, I think, in that round. So, let's get Darren, for your second round. You are going to have 60 seconds. When you see the sundial and you hear the boom, you're on the clock.
Okay, so after Spring Awakening ran on Broadway for over 850 performances, it continued to be produced all over the world with several notable productions. It transferred to the West End in London and won an Olivier Award. But perhaps the most creative and innovative production was the 2015 Broadway revival, when the show was presented simultaneously in spoken English and American Sign Language, with numerous deaf actors playing roles simultaneously with speaking actors. The show opened to rave reviews, ran for 4 months, and was nominated for a Tony for Best Revival of a Musical. And of course, Spring Awakening was a touring success as well. It toured the U.S. on the Broadway Across America circuit, and it even went overseas to countries like Australia, Singapore, China, and South Korea. And Korea is where the story takes another turn. Yeah.
Nicely done. Thank you for that, Darren. All right. Adri, what did you think of Darren's basically cliffhanger there with a
Well, I don't know if you guys caught this, but Rihanna had an ASL interpreter for the Super Bowl thing that she did, and it was the greatest thing ever. So that just made me think of watching a highly promiscuous play an ASL. Like, what kind of dirty stuff would be happening there? And then one red flag I had was Singapore. Okay, weren't they known for caning people just for something as simple as spitting gum on the sidewalk or something like that? So I have trouble believing that they would be okay with this play there, but not someone spitting gum on the sidewalk. So that's a red flag for me.
Okay.
I question you, sir. I question you.
Good question. Good question indeed. Alan, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, Singapore, you can't spray paint their cars, you can't spit gum on the ground. I see that because they really want to keep their area clean and free of vandalism, but what occurs in a theater, maybe not as controversial to them, especially if it's in a language that they don't understand. I don't know what language they're even doing it in Singapore. So that's not the issue that I've got. All I've heard from Darren so far in round 2 is that A Spring Awakening was a successful play, and I don't think that's technically a bluff.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, Adri, we're going to bring you up now. We've heard from Alan in round 2. We've heard from Darren. You are going to give us your second leg of your story, and you have 60 seconds on the clock. And you hear the boom, the floor is yours.
Okay, I forgot I had to go again. You caught me off guard, but okay. So in 1651, where I left off, the town of Springfield, Massachusetts was rocked by a huge scandal when Mary Bliss had a mental breakdown. She had been recently abandoned by her previous husband and went on to marry an outcast of the town called Hugh Parsons. So in 1645, Mary Bliss became Mary Parsons. Together, they had 3 children. However, 2 of the babies died for unknown reasons not too long after she gave birth to the children. And it drove Mary into a deep despair and insanity. Without any solace, she channeled her confusion and suffering against somebody who had just moved to Springfield, a woman named Mrs. Marshfield. So, reflecting on the last couple of years, something crazy happens, you blame someone else, bada bing, bada boom, witch trials.
Bada bing, bada boom, witch trials. Right. Alan, what's your take on Adri's second leg of the story?
Bliss and Parsons. So yeah, we know the Winter Wonderland song with Parson Brown, and bliss is a state of being. I don't know. These sound like potentially made up names. So
okay,
a lot of stuff that Springfield, Massachusetts would be famous for, and yet I've never heard of it.
All right, potentially made up names indeed. Darren, what's your take on Adri's story?
Well, I mean, echoing what Alan says, Bliss really does sound like a stripper name. But the rest of the story is. Right. This is how we make the money on the show. But the rest of it sounds very plausible. Some bad shit happens to somebody, and there's a lot of transference, and they just blame the new lady in town, and presumably burn her as a witch. But I don't want to go forward to round 3.
Don't give it away yet. Don't give it away.
Yeah. That you're saying that could have happened in 1651. It's probably true. Probably
could happen in 2023.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
There you go. All right.
It's happening now.
Oh, it is indeed. If we take a look back up at the round tracker 9300, we will see 3 dots filled in now for round number 1. Indeed, filled in for round number 2, which only
Chris,
means one thing. Yes.
Before we have to mention to the audience that now is the time to start thinking about who they might want to accuse as being the bluff. The audience can chime in anytime.
That is right, Adam. The audience about who they think is going to be the bluff, and they can start chiming in at any time. So if you think so far that the Adri story about Springfield Township, Springfield, Massachusetts, bluff story, let us know. If you think Alan's story about the history of the spring and the coil is the bluff, let us know. Darren's history of the Spring Awakening play and the corresponding controversy surrounding it is the bluff story. Please let us know. Start putting those comments in the on the screen, and we will, at the end of this round, we will all try to make a guess as to which we believe is our bluff of this week. And so far, we have one adamant audience member. Rich is convinced, before we even begin round 3, Rich is convinced that Adri is the bluff. So we shall see if Rich is correct as we move to round number 3. All right, so we've had Adri start a round. We've had Alan start a round. Darren, it is your turn to start a round, and you're going to start our wrap-up round here. So when the sun dies and you hear the boom, you're going to have 45 seconds to wrap up your story inspired by spring, about Spring Awakening and the controversy surrounding that play. So the floor is yours.
So when Spring Awakening came to Seoul, Korea in April of 2010, it was a new kind of theater for Korea. But Spring Awakening wasn't the only new thing in town. North Korea had just got a brand new leader, Kim Jong-un, and he wanted to show off his influence. And so, without regard to intellectual property law or world opinion, North Korea launched its own heavily censored production of the controversial play. And without human rights or unions to get in the ways, Pyongyang mounted its production in just 8 weeks, opening on March 23rd, the first day of the Cherry Blossom Festival, the hallmark of spring in Asia, and beating South Korea to the punch by a full week.
So you're saying that the North Koreans prevented chicken soup for the soul, are you? Is that what you're saying? Adam.
Wow. Deserves.
Well deserved indeed. Alan, what did you think? Alan, what did you think of Darren's wrap up?
What happened now in North Korea? They were the first to do what?
That's awesome.
They put on their own version.
North Korea staged Spring Awakening, the show that features abortion and other
heavily censored.
Oh, okay.
Alan, that means that they basically said hello and goodbye, and that was it.
It's spring. Are you awake? The end.
Yeah.
The end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in Korea, the answer is no.
Yes,
Right,
He probably died of starvation.
Mm-hmm.
It was so heavily censored. They just changed it down to Spring King, and that's what they called him.
They just wanted to be the first to stage the show, but they technically didn't stage the show. Okay, that's all right.
Right.
All right.
Exactly. All right, Adrian.
I'm just picturing Little Women, except even more conservative. in North Korea.
And
so
even
I had one detail that I had a question about. In round 2, you mentioned that the revival came out in 2015, but in this round, you said that it was in Seoul, Korea in 2010. Was that a misunderstanding on my part, or was that a miscommunication on yours?
It went off Broadway, and then after Broadway, it went touring, and then after it toured for a while, they did a revival with deaf actors in it.
Oh, okay, so 2010 was truly 2010 in Korea. Got it. All right. I have no idea what to even think.
I mean, who doesn't know about North Korean Broadway?
Right.
Clearly, I don't pull out knows all about it.
That's right. I don't pull out characters in Spring Awakening, if I'm not mistaken. So
I think it's in there.
No, they censored
We're out of there.
It is the
South
topic.
Korea, that's good.
all right. Well, Adri, let's get you up here for round number 3. We are going to hear Adri's conclusion. Adri, when you see it come up and you hear the boom, you're going to have 45 seconds to wrap up your story inspired by Springfield, Massachusetts. Yours.
Ready. All right. So Mary Parsons accused Mrs. Marshfield, the newcomer, of witchcraft. Marshfield immediately took legal action, and Mary Parsons was found guilty of slander and sentenced to being whipped or paying Mrs. Marshfield 24 bushels of corn. At that time, outcast and husband to Mary Parsons, Hugh Parsons, went off the deep end and into an insane rage, making threatening comments said to be influenced by an evil being. The couple was humiliated by the community that never liked them to begin with, so they just went nuts. The tormented Mary turned on Hugh, accusing him of witchcraft. Then Hugh sent everything into a witch mania, and So
Good. Wrap up.
Okay, Hugh and Mary both went on trial for being witches. The third baby died. Hugh was found. He was acquitted, and Mary was sentenced to death by hanging. Except she died in jail before she could even be hung.
Wow.
I don't think.
Okay.
I don't think she was a witch. I think she was just really sad that all her babies died.
Aw.
Alan, what's your take on Adri's wrap up here? As I don't pull out, it says Nutty Mary.
I first of all, I didn't know that instead of getting killed, you could just buy someone a bunch of corn. I think that would be a much long-awaited addendum to the Crucible. I'd like to see that chapter where they're like, you know what? Let's forget all this. Here's your corn. There's your corn. It's Massachusetts law, so you can't say I can't.
Right. Darren, what's your take, Darren?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this approach. Has anyone tried that with Vladimir Putin? Just here's a whole shitload of corn. Stop invading Ukraine. Do you think it would work?
If you substitute corn for chips, for those chips, not corn chips, but the chips that they're looking to get from Ukraine, that would work.
Computer chips?
Yeah, computer chips.
Oh.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thinker.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was the whole invasion was based on computer chips.
My theory.
They can't get a PlayStation 5 either.
That's right. It all started over gaming issues. So let's bring Alan up. We've heard from Darren. We've heard from Adri wrapping up their story. So, Alan, you are going to have the floor when you see the sundial and you hear the boom. You're going to have 45 seconds to wrap the story. The floor is yours.
So the first use of the coiled spring was actually in furniture in the United States, and then from then on, we've obviously got multiple uses for the spring since. But that was the original use for it. Now we use it in mattresses. It was in 1857 was the first patent in America for the use in the chair seats. And the coil spring was placed in mattresses in 1871 by a German inventor named Heinrich Westphal. And nowadays we have the mass production of springs which occurred during the Industrial Revolution, and they are used in shock absorbers for train cars, trains, baby carriages, you name it.
Okay. So, Alan has been for this that we would have been having bows and arrows instead popping through instead of coils into our back and our butts as we sat on chairs and couches and staying over too long on their rollout on their cots. Adri, what do you think here of Alan's wrap up?
I'm a little suspicious. I feel like Alan and Darren are in cahoots with each other because both of them have German ties to their story, and both of them include mattresses somewhere in their story. So I'm feeling threatened and set up to be the bluffer. I feel threatened.
Okay.
Oh.
She feels an And what do you think of Alan's
feeling
story?
accusations coming.
Conspiracy.
Oh yeah. Well, I am a little disappointed that he didn't add any more simple machines into his story, but I'm going to give a little bonus credit from I don't pull you out commenting so much.
Okay.
Now, the coil might form a similar machine as the simple machine is the screw, so that might count if you'll allow me.
No, that's in my story.
Oh, that's our cahoots again. All right.
Cahooting.
Yeah. We both
guys are
screwing.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time now, this time of the show, where we will find out who indeed is this week's bluff on the horn and try to see if we can figure out who it is just based on our own detective work or guesses. In the audience, please do indeed pop up your guess as to who and see if Rich has changed his mind or if he still thinks Adri is the bluff. But let's start with bluffing.
I'm sorry? Who do I
Adri, who do you think is bluffing?
Oh my gosh. I was going with Alan. I think I'm going to change to Darren.
One vote for Darren.
Little Women Spring Awakening.
Switch up.
Okay.
Who are you asking, Chris?
Alan.
Well, that's a good question. So, if I voted for Darren, that means Adri as the bluff would get away scot-free. But I say, not on my watch, Adri. We're going to say that Springfield, Massachusetts isn't even the first Springfield, and I'm going to call bluff on that. There we have it.
Okay. All right. And Darren, what do you think? Who do you think is bluffing, Darren?
I got to go with Adri as well. I mean, there was no mention of Jebediah Springfield in there at all.
Oh, God. None.
None whatsoever.
Or Shelbyville.
All right.
Or Shelbyville, that's right.
Or Shelbyville, okay. And I don't pull out says, no way someone would make up a play being held in North Korea and the bow and arrow being 65,000 years old sounds legit. Adriana is the bluff. Mary Parsons is fake.
Whoa.
All right.
That's a lot on Adriana.
That is a lot.
Oh, gosh.
Not on
That is
Adriana.
Longest
Chris.
audience response ever.
What do you think, Chris?
Well, I'm a big fan of the Alan Parsons Project, so I think that might be a descendant of Mary Parsons. So I'm going to throw, I'm going to throw my hat onto Alan.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Until then, he had 0 votes.
He had 0 votes until then, yeah. So let us see, because I don't know. No one knows. So why don't we find out? I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and let's find out who the bluff is this week.
All right, you got it. I'll take it from here, Chris. If you'll step off our virtual stage, I am going to reveal, because I and I alone have the knowledge. Well, Gina knows too, but we're the tech team and we know you don't. Was your bluff tonight, was it Alan? Or could it have been Adriana? Or could it have been Darren? Prepare yourself for the reveal. Tonight's bluff this whole time was Darren! Well done, Darren. You didn't get away scot-free, but you fooled a lot of folks out there. Good job.
Yeah. Nice.
Well done, Darren, indeed. Well done, everyone. Well done, AJ, for picking Darren and pointing that out. For you.
Wow, I didn't know emoji could come through on those.
Awesome.
We've got audience members chiming in with text and emoji.
Rest in peace, Mary Bliss, indeed. All right. All right. Well, thank you for watching another episode of History Bluffs. It was a super fun episode tonight. Thank you to Adri, Alan, and Darren, our armchair historians. Our audience members who watched and viewed, and also to those who commented with some comments during. Thank you to our tech team, Adam and Gina. Appreciate you guys so much. And my name is Chris. I've been your host, and I'm going to hand it off to Adam.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, audience, for joining us and our wonderful historians. We're going to see you next week. Tune in with us. Learn something. See you then.